Okay. Good evening to all. Today, as we discussed, we'll be having a discussion on significance of risk management for project professionals. Now, this is a topic which we selected or I selected based on my experience and my contribution or the learning which took place in my NICMAR activity, as well as it's a subject which is a very uh, heart to me, near to heart to me, and that is why I expressed my desire to Vivekji to give a presentation on this. Our presentation is more or less will be on this area, which will, as it is in front of you, which will discussing the what is the risk and various aspects which everybody knows. It is not the case that I am nobody is aware. It is an attempt to understand the concept of risk with respect to the project in a more specific way. That is what I will say. Now, all of us know that risk is defined as uncertainty. And this uncertainty, how it is defined as uncertainty, why the uncertainty exists in a project environment, that is one of the major issue. Now, when we go to the planning stage, when people say that we will assign the resources, we will schedule it properly, we try to do it. But when all these things doing, when we plan any project, in that planning, there is always a probability has considered or degree of confidence has considered as 90 to 95%, or depending on the project, even less. So what is the meaning of that? The meaning, one of the meaning is that it is 95% probability that the project will complete as per the result. There are certain elements of activities and events which we do. What is another meaning of this? That there is a good chance that 5% probability exists or a 10% probability exists that project may have a failure issues. Now, earlier days, this risk management itself is started somewhere in 1990 when the recession has started, and particularly in the field of economics, where the economic models along with the funding model people tried in USA, and they find a better result. What is a better result? When they identified the risk, they could able to say that what way our investment or economic plan and the funding can be modified. Since economic planning and funding is related to the numbers only, it was easier to get the feel directly that if we invest this return we have got. If we do other way around, what could be the return? And that is what in the financial market, people started thinking that along with the investment, if we try to identify the risk related to investment, and the risk management becomes a priority area. If we see another area where what is we called as day to day, day in, day out, we know as a construction industry, where there is a concept called as environmental impact assessment. And that environmental impact assessment needs to be carried out before the project to start or sanction the project. What is the purpose of doing this? And one of the objective of that EIA, though as a commercial people, we say that they may be for the purpose of money the government wants, and that is why there could be a thing, that is one thought. But in reality, in a scientific way, the risk management, to identify the risk of a project, the environmental EIA is called environmental impact assessment. Once we do the environmental impact assessment, this says that to give the remedial solution, how to reduce that impact. So if that impact is not reduced in the project planning stage of a particular infrastructure or civil construction or other things, then there is a good possibility that this impact may lead to risk. And if that risk is not, basically the EIA identifies the risk, and if the risk is not being covered, it may lead to disaster. And that is what some of the kind of thing which we have experienced 3 years before, when we are having in the month of July, a very big flood near Kedarnath, and we had a lot of problems, and the issues were resulted into environmental risk, where a lot of the soil being a very weak, people have taken certain decisions, and that has resulted into what is called as disaster. So what I want to say, impress upon, if the risk is not covered, it will lead to a disaster. And that is why the risk becomes an important parameter. Second issue is that all of us know that we have a what is called as, all of us know that if risk is not considered, it will lead to disaster, but this disaster can be protected. So all of us know that when we do the planning, we have to do a very extensive job in collecting a lot of data, lot of information, their assumptions, their resources, and so on and so forth. And then only we can say that the planning is pakka, or planning is has a certain meaning. But as against that, if what is the project idea, if that idea is being thought of analytically along with the whatever the stakeholder partners and the objective and things like that, without very much going into the depth, one can identify the risk and try to say that this project can be succeed. And that is why risk got a very significance in a project environment. Or people say that before planning, you can do the risk assessment, and or whatever the planning you have done, you do the risk assessment, and if there the risk is able to cover, then it is a result that the project is going to success. So there are simple examples like two-wheeler driving has a risk, but does it fail every time? And then the next parameter come into the existence of understanding the risk is that this parameter is nothing but a situation. And that situation in case of a driving could be related to road conditions, could be related to speed, could be related to a driver skill, and such kind of things can lead to a risk. And that is why in case of a project environment, people feel that one has to carry out the risk assessment, and that risk assessment, I have explained what I said in the another way, what is the decision box. And in that decision box, when we do the planning, whether yes activity or leads to a planning, but what about the no activity? Or when we say that if it is a 90% probability, what about that 10% failure? When it will happen? Under what circumstances happen? Now, if we see the project environment, and if you try to find out this 10% environment where the failure likely to takes place, there is a good chance that if we get a pure understanding of this failure and the circumstances, we can take a precaution that such situation will not exist. There is a one way. There is another way is that even that since we have done the exercise, that exercise is so important that you are prepared even if that particular risk occurs. And then it becomes a very, very risk management got an upper hand in the management field to do anything. Even if you do a strategy, even if you do any of the thing, people come out with a saying that one must find out the risk. Now let us go to the definition of the project risk, and let us see in project context. Though this reference is old as a third edition, but more or less it remains same. Defining the risk as an uncertainty inherent in plans and possibility of something happening that can affect the prospect of achieving the business as our project goal. Now project goal is defined, but there is a chances that it may go wrong, and that is defined as uncertainty. Now when that chances or uncertainty happen, that uncertainty can happen the situation leading to an event, the occurrence of which is likely to deviate from the estimated or forecast value, because project has either forecast or estimate, and that estimate we keep certain margins, we keep certain variation Take a simple case like planning. We go from critical path to PERT and we add a certain variance within the system. So likewise, we can add certain variance, but there is a limit. And that is why there is a need to check this project scenario, planning scenario with the help of another tool, and that is called as risk. And that is defined as a risk for a project environment. And then the people will try to identify what is that probability of event which is resulting into the failure and what will be the impact of that. And that impact is generally loss or gain. Now, can we have the planning without risk? Can anybody say, can we say that anything which we have done as a planning is a 100% proof? Can anybody say something? This is a discussion, so you please come forward. So can we say during the, once we do the plan and we can say 100% it will happen just like that, I have taken all efforts. Can we say that? Anybody?
No.
No, but see,
No.
it may not be 100%, but if you take care of the causes after identifying the risk, there is a cause for every risk. If
Yeah.
causes are taken care, probably to a certain extent, we can reduce the risk. Maybe,
Agreed.
of course, it could be
But for
1%,
that,
2%,
I
risk could be
agree.
left.
I agree. But can we make it zero?
No.
Zero
Zero
is
is zero.
unpredictable. We
Very
can't
difficult.
say
Zero
zero is
is
possible.
not only difficult, it is not
Yes.
possible.
Zero is not possible.
It is not possible at all. And that is what is one of the things to accept the risk as a concept. I do an activity of standing for giving a lecture, but I may fall down. I'm giving this lecture for 3 hours, day in, day out. But under certain situation, I am likely to fall down. I may say that I have taken medicine. I have taken a certain thing. Does it mean that it will not happen? So in simple word, we can say that risk cannot be zero. Since we are doing planning, every planning has a certain risk. And then the concept has changed or the thinking is changing that you identify that planning whereas a minimum risk. Provided it is possible or provided you have done the risk management in advance. And that is what is the power of risk management as a tool. Compared to the other management exercises, risk management cannot be done as a one like finance management, materials management. All these things management are like a line function. Whereas risk management is a something which is a what is called as cross-functional. We'll come to that. But what is a learning? Risk occurs under certain situation. When it occurs, it does not mean that it will occur with the same probability everywhere. So there is a probability which occur and that also depends on situation. So these are and when it occurs, it has an impact. When the scooter has having an accident, it has an impact. If we go by two-wheeler, the problem will be different if you go by four-wheeler, and that is what we say that moving with four-wheeler is less risky. It is not that it does not have an accident. It will have an accident, but the impact of that accident will be less. And that is what we have to understand when project environment, that risk always exists. Risk appears under certain situation, under certain, and it has a certain probability, and that probability also along with that there is a certain impact. In project plan, the risk exists, hence risk assessment needs to be followed by planning to be followed by risk assessment. Risk needs find out the project inception may be started at the stage. One of the basic thing is that number of times people say that when to carry out the risk management. Sometimes people will say that it has to be done prior to a project. When we started the project, you should have done. But one can understand it. That time we were not aware or not very much involved in that, but can I do it now? And then the simple rule of project risk assessment is a continuous process. and you can implement the risk at any time, but prior to executing it, prior to doing it. And that is what is the rule for the risk management as a implementation. You can do the risk management anytime. You can start risk management at any time. However, it should be done prior to happening. And that is another thing which we have to understand for the risk. Now, another issue is that what is the risk? Whether the risk is a crisis. Number of times people say that while doing the project, we are not knowing this thing, that thing, and we have assumed it. Now, we assumed it and without knowing it, and that is why crisis is the result of unplanned work without understanding the threat of failure. And that becomes the crisis. But if you understand the threat of failure, you will convert that threat of failure into a risk assessment. Risk management is assessment of project plan along with the assessment of likely failure along with the context of the project. The stakeholder combination, regulatory framework, financial support, development cost, these are the certain areas which can become a cause for the risk. Now, another aspect of the risk, generally a typical construction industry or any engineering project industry has 4 or 5 stakeholders like client, promoter, developer, financial institute, regulator, and things like that. And then the question comes is that who will do the risk management? Now, when you talk about the project, you have to do the risk assessment of project as a whole. That means we are considering the project, whether the stakeholder, whoever is the stakeholder, that all are to be taken into account and you carry out the risk assessment of a project as a whole. Can the individual stakeholder do the risk assessment? The answer is yes. A EPC contractor is being given a certain contract to a secondary contractor. The secondary contractor may be finding out the risk of taking that contract, maybe on the financial field, maybe on the, like a primary contractor may find out the risk in that particular vendor also. So risk management can be done for an individual stakeholder also, and for the project implementation as a whole for the all stakeholders, the project risk should be identified as a whole. Now, what is the advantage of project risk identifying as a whole? At a later date, when we are listing the different risks, it will become easier for who will handle that. We will come to that towards the end when we are doing the risk management. But as a principle, if I am one of the stakeholder, whether I should take this particular contract or not, the individual may take the risk assessment of his scope and try to identify the risk. Whereas project as a promoter will maybe do a complete risk. Government may do in case of infrastructure project, the government must be doing or is doing the risk assessment of a project from the various aspects, and then they are corresponding to that, they are defining the policies, modifying the policies, and things like that. One of the typical examples of this is that earlier days, road projects used to take a lot of time, if you recollect. That is, I am talking about around 10 years before. Now, I am not saying that today the road projects are taking place very fast, but whatever the project stakeholders' policies are being modified, that unless and until 70% of the land is not acquainted, the project should not be started. And that automatically takes care of delay of the project, because you are not starting the project unless and until the land is acquainted. And by doing that kind of decisions or policy, the risk related to project get automatically reduced. There will be a certain up and down that will be there, but it is a kind of thing in which the project will not get suffered. The risk management is carried out after establishing the context. Now, another aspect of the risk assessment, which is very, very important, if somebody will say that since the planning has a lot of problem, shall we do the risk assessment of each and every activity? Because we want the project should be get completely what is called as satisfied or completely success. And in order to do that, people may say that we should do each and every event or activity should be checked with the risk management tool. And the answer is no. Because all of us know that when we do the planning or when we do the project, we are already under certain pressures, and that pressures are always exist in a project environment. Everything is required in time and in cost. But then reference to a particular that environment, if you define the context that under this situation, the risk is likely to take place. And then in that context, you do the risk management. That is very, very important and vital for project risk management. We should be able to identify a situation which is going to lead to a certain failure, and that becomes the context which is prior to the project, and that is why the risk management cannot be done to everything, but risk management has to be done with certain context. Objective of the risk management must be well defined, otherwise the exercise become futile, because it is not an academic exercise. Second most important threat in the risk management is that situation may change with respect to time. And sometimes whatever the risk assessment we do earlier, we become what is called as it gets shifted. And that is why we said that risk assessment is a continuous process. We do the again risk assessment under new situation. Since we have earlier done the risk management for a situation, even if the situation is changed, we should do a risk assessment so that that situation lead to failure exists or doesn't exist. Now, this is the classical thinking which is exist, and that is what the first step is. You establish the context. Unless and until you don't establish the context, this whatever the time, resources, everything which will be putting, that will be not be justified. Some of the more details are given on the slide, and it is giving a certain chronological order how it goes, and that is what the risk management exercise takes place. This is maybe before execution, after the award of contract, maybe much before the planning stage. No, there are government guidelines for certain things. There are not government guidelines on certain private projects, but people still do it, those who understand it. Yet in today's scenario, during the execution also, people are having risk identifying person at the site. There is a site planning, and in that site planning, the quality person look into the site completed work, whether it is as per quality or not. There is a people are started doing for risk assessment for the work which is planned at the site prior to carrying out that work. Like you are having what is called as high rise building, and you are having what is called as there is a plinth or there is a foundation which is much below the ground, and there are a lot of risks which exist, and that exist. You have estimated certain stone, but that stone may be coming in a different way. But that is, you have planned certain thing based on certain surveys available, but still there is a certain more stone or different stone appeared. So all these things can be envisaged while doing the project. The classic example of this, which we can say, is that which is presently just recently inaugurated bridge of what is called as bridge of Kashmir, where continuously they were estimating the risk, identifying solution along with the planning. Okay, coming to the what is project management environment. In a project management environment, as we said that we make the decisions, and decisions are based on certain predictions. Predictions are again based on certain either assumptions or the fact. And but we cannot say that we cannot take the decision because this prediction is based on something and like that. And that all the earlier projects were short duration, stable environment. This environment is related to business environment. Whereas the modern projects are long project lifespan, large capital outlay, change economic environment, change financial situation. What it means, we are having a funding, we are having the money, but we are not able to get the money unless and until you complete the work. In a project environment, if you see the requirement of money, it is maximum requirement to the initial stage, and as compared to, because he has to make a lot of efforts to develop the system, and from that perspective, amount of the advance which he will get is very mere, or we can say that there is an unbalanced cash flow when you are doing the project, and that has led to identifying the uncertainty so that our situation should not go out of hand. Now, what is the risk assessment scope? What is the risk you identify the project? Risk assessment is not a single process, but this is a systematic approach to organizing, analyzing scientific knowledge, information, supporting a risk decision. So what we can say that in case of a functional parameters, we have a materials management, material specification, material delivery time, material purchase order. So it's a function which is done by one organization, but one group of people, and it is not much involved with the other people. But when it comes to risk assessment, you have to go on getting the information from the various sources to support whether the risk exists or not. The risk management is a systematic process for identification, assessment, quantification, analyzing, control, and communication of risk. Most important, the scope is life, property, and other valued object related to project. Anything which is related to project, if it is getting affected, that needs to be understood as a project risk. In materials procurement also, they are finding out some risk, but it is limited to certain area. Whereas when it comes to project, the scope is wide, scope is multifacial, and that is why you have to collect the information. As a result of this, what people do, when we try to do the risk assessment, the people who are involved in the project on a different areas come together, and they become what is called as risk management team, and they follow the process so that project risk can be understood, project risk can be identified properly. A single person or a group of certain department alone is not acceptable, is not proper for doing the risk management. That is what I will say. Now, when we do the risk management, you can observe this, which what all the project risk it will cover, and you are getting so many areas. A simple thing like what is called as human resources risk, and there is written as lack of leadership. What is one of the thing for the project? The project manager leaves frequently, and when we go into the details of the risk, environment may not be proper, the salary may not be proper. No, these are the kind of things which comes out. I will generally say when I was teaching this student that risk management is sometimes is a way to think negatively. And negative thinking is generally or most of the times not acceptable by management. If you go to the management and say that your this planning will fail, they will not listen at you. They will not simply look at it. The giving the importance is a secondary. But if you same thing, if you tell in a logical way, in a some different concept like risk, this time is inadequate because there is a delay of the purchase order and or it is a monopolistic supply and that is the risk. Are you with me? Are you able to get me? So if you give something in between, it will be better for me. Now, and that is why sometimes people also say that risk management is a tool which helps the project control to reduce the project loss. Now, whenever risk happens, the loss is going to be there. But that loss is being reduced by taking the risk measures. All of us know that we take the medical insurance. And medical insurance, when we go to the insurance agency, we have some different experiences. 3 years before, the different experience. Now there is a little bit different experience. We do the insurance of car and we have a certain experience about the insurance. Now insurance is nothing but taking care of, we are transferring our risk to the insurance agency. We'll discuss that little bit later. But what I want to impress upon is that whatever we have done or we have planned, can we take a view that whatever I have planned, under what circumstances it will fail? And then the thing becomes very complex because project is a result of all such parameters which are in front of you. And then the question comes, where the risk lies. As I told earlier, there has to be a context is to be developed. This context can be developed around this project requirements. And that context can be, or everything is right, but the cost may go wrong. And that becomes a risk assessment or context for the risk. Sometimes it happens that quality standards are given exceptionally high. They have made the quality plan, quality assurance plan, quality checking plan, and things like that. But people will, when they look at from the negative, why does this quality is going to delay the project or quality management is going to delay the project? People go into the depth and may find out saying that some of the quality measures are more than required. And getting approval for that quality, getting the expertise for that checking may become the risk. So this is what the way project can be, what I can say is that project can be improved. If you see a project management PMBOK approach, the PMBOK approach says that you keep a certain slot above the planning for the risk, and then you do your activity. But that is a outcome of whatever this process is. And I'm more or less talking about that process. So these are the, and that is one of the reason people say that instead of I am individually carrying out the risk assessment, let us do the risk assessment together. Now with this, we'll little bit try to understand what is this risk. Like we have the name, surname, we have a locality from which we come or the location from which we belong to. Deshpande is from Nagpur or from Karnataka, like that. So after giving all this complete name, you get certain feel, you get a certain identity. Now, when we are identifying the risk in this all jugglery, how we should say that what is this characteristics of risk? And that has resulted into identifying the risk in a different way. There is a risk which is defined as pure risk. Now, pure risk exists when there is a chance of loss. You have done the risk assessment. It is a risk which is always lead to what is called as loss, and that is called as pure risk. In case of a construction, engineering, or many more projects, which are we call as earth project, that is nothing but what is called as the projects which are taken place with a certain time and other things, whereas software projects are something called as fire projects, where all technology, everything is defined and you have to work out. Sometimes those projects give the speculative risk. People take longer time initially and you complete the project and it becomes a speculative risk. No, speculative risk is that risk which can have a chance of gain as well as loss. A classical example of this is our share market or our investment. You have a speculation that the with certain tool and you certain methodology and you say that this is going to get a loss. As I said in the beginning, that in the financial market, people has taken speculative risk and when they find the problems of loss, they modified the investment pattern. You are also finding based on the such kind of parameters, there is a risk meter, and you always find that whenever there is a mutual fund person who is talking to you, he always talks about what is the risk exist in this investment and what is your risk appetite. Or people will say that you don't do the investment much in the equity if you don't have a risk appetite. But there is a person who is ready to take higher risk and he says that I will not lose, or even if it is lose, I will gain it afterwards by some way, or I will see that I will modify that investment and always I will try to get the gain. Both the options are available. And that is such kind of risk is being considered as what is called as speculative risk. Another way is exist, which is particularly with the projects, is there is a certain known risk. There is a certain unknown risk. For example, shower is going to be there in month of June is a some way unknown risk. The scope of supply is going to change is a known risk. The regulator is going to ask certain different requirement is going to be a known risk. Then there is a something called as unknown risk, like what is called as what has happened in the COVID is nothing but unknown leaks. It is nothing but force majeure clause, which is an unknown risk. This classification helps in characterizing the risk. Now, as we said that we do the risk assessment process, and in that process, first stage is identification, and then is the classification or then quantification. But we should know its nature, and to identify its nature, we can characterize it, whether it is a known risk, it is a pure risk, it is a known and pure, it is a known and speculative kind of way. And finally, one can understand the risk characteristics. Now, if you take a typical project environment, some of the risks are generic risks and some of the risks are specific risks. The risks which are related to technology becomes the specific risk, whereas the risk related to regular contract, commercial and financial are become general risk, or land acquisition become general risk. Now, in order to understand the risk, we have to understand little bit about the what is called as what is the stakeholders combination, or what is a project platform is, or project framework is. If you see a first column, it is nothing but a stakeholders combination. So at number of times we say that the ownership of the project is not properly defined within the stakeholders, and that is why we are getting the problem during execution. This is the kind of statement we hear number of times, and that is why who will do what and whether it is his area, and that kind of assessment is to be taken. Now, to substantiate this, whenever there is a road project, the road projects are generally developed by State Road Transportation Authority. And in that, why that certain nigam or state authority has been identified while developing the road project? Can anybody throw a light? Can you say something? The contractor is going to do the road. NHAI is going to develop the road. The contractor is going to execute the road. Then why we require MSRTC? Maharashtra state. All of us know that Mohammadpur road is being maintained by certain government agency or road transport development agency. Are you with me? Do you agree with me? Yes or
Yes,
no?
yes, yes.
What is their role? पैसा खाना इतना ही role है. And their role is related to, when it comes to land, the ownership of the land in this country is basically first, who should have what land is governed by the central government policy, and the owner of the land is the state government. And if I want to give the land acquisition, the government don't want to, or the project has to roll out, you require some entity who will take care of all such legal aspect of the acquisition of road. Because if I go as a private agency, I will not be in a position to identify everything. But if there is a government procedure to identify that land and identify its pros and cons, then he can correct it and able to hand over. Are you with me? Do you agree with me? Are you getting the importance or why? So at the stakeholder combinations, people are made in such a way so that they are in a position to resolve the project development problems. If we would have not provided that authority, people would have gone from pillar to post for the each and every piece of land. And as we know that land piece is moving from one place to another. Now latest development are taking place where people are doing the road by state government, where NHAI is not at all, national authority, road transport authority is not at all involved, but the state road. Now automatically the role of a state road transport development agency change. It changes from not only for the thing, but also to do the complete project management along with the selecting the contractor to execution. What is the result? I don't want to comment at this junction, but these are the kind of, why government thinks like that, because they feel that I will be able to utilize my government machinery in a faster way to complete the project. That could be one of the driving force. Now, one can say that there is a financial risk, and this financial risk may occur in project execution by the contractor, and that kind of combination can be defined as a context. So it helps in defining the context. The contractor may find the planning as a risk when they are doing project execution, and that is what. Yeah. Anything, please? So that kind of context can be developed. It may be developed. The last column is related to what is called as the actual work which we do as a project work. These are the second column is related to the aspect of the project, whereas third column is related to what is called as phases of the project. When it comes to a construction project feasibility, project development is done by different agency. The different agency may be a part of project execution, may not be a part of execution. The construction projects are really the planning. That is, I generally divide the project development into two. One is for the feasibility and development, other is the planning and project execution. So like that, those people who are doing this contractor job or not contractor, construction job or construction project, infrastructure project, they are more or less bothered about the part of the development starting from planning, whereas scope definition and whereas the other parameters like what is the number of vehicles will move on the road after the road is developed and feasibility is considered, all these things may be done by a certain development consultant. And outcome of the development consultant work as a DPR. And that DPR helps the project development to start. Number of times we also find that whatever is given DPR is being modified much prior to tender bidding based on the why it is done. The situation may be changed, the assumptions which I have done may be changed, but DPR may be modified, and that is what we learn day in, day out, even in the newspaper, and try to say that it may have a political will, that is a separate issue. But even there is a political will, nobody will take only for their interest. They have to show some other social interest. That is what my comment will be. But if you talk about a professional project management, the professional project management will say that though we have done certain assumptions at DPR, these assumptions needs to be checked. Or people will say that do the risk assessment of DPR and try to modify whichever is possible. That is what is the power. And that is why we want to understand the stakeholder combination. Whenever there is a project comes in, 2-3 things needs to be identified. What is a corporate partnership or stakeholders of the project? What are their responsibilities? What way the project phases has been handled? And that study becomes a kind of homework for any person who is working in a project under tender bidding, planning, whatever the functional area, because that will give an insight while doing his functional area that this project is a result of these things and it is having a certain things, these assumptions, and that understanding will help them for doing their functional job. That is another way the risk management help the individual. If we go to L&T or any other big project companies, EPC companies, number of times they ask the supervisor or a middle management level or junior management level to write the risk. Whatever you have planned, you also write the risk associated with it. So that the higher management take that planning along with the risk he has interpreted. As we said earlier, we cannot write a risk just out of cuff. We have to write the risk in context with the situation, in context with the objective, in context with the certain area. Sometimes certain projects are there, people will say that whatever the money required, you do it. And then you will say that project cost is increasing, is a risk, is it futile? So likewise, there is a need to get into, there could be a very highly technology oriented project like the bridge which is being recently, and you'll say that I will not take care of the risk because the design is changing every time, my scope is changing, how I will do it. You can't do that. The design has an inbuilt risk that everybody has agreed. So automatically the planning person, the people who are executing the project has to match with that. And that is what the risk helps in understanding the project in a better way. Now, what way we can identify the risk or what are the different risks? Some of the risks are listed in front of you. Business risk, operation risk. If you see a typical project risk, design risk, because when we do the design, there are certain assumptions. When you do the DPR, DPR is based on certain inputs. And then that becomes a design risk. Financial risk. A simple example is that there is a funding and that funding is coming from state government and state government is not having money. It is going to have financial risk. But the state government is giving the funding, but it is getting some central government funding, it is getting some World Bank funding. Still some risk exists because the state government or the contractor which has put is not in a position to give the proper documentation. And documentation is not proper, you are not getting the finance. You are not getting the money released. The financial risk can be put into two ways. One is the cash inflow outflow, other is the funding. The funding may be available, but you are not getting. That could be a risk situation. Funding itself is not available. That is another way. If we see this new infrastructure project, what they do first, they try to first patch up or they first link up what will be the funding mechanism. And once the funding mechanism is being defined, then they talk about the DPR, or even the DPR is based on that funding mechanism. Another is the contract risk. All contract statement is one way is the risk, because what way that contract statement will be. A simple thing like you take a contract of a turnkey contract and the specifications are not well defined. What will happen? I have said that we have to supply, it is a turnkey contract. The moment I say that turnkey contract, whatever is required to satisfy the goal and objective of the project and defined by drawing, data sheet, specification is in your scope. But those specification area is not properly defined, quantities are not well defined, then turnkey contract may lead to loss. In case of civil contract, still people go for rate contract. What is the reason? The reason is that when we go for a rate contract, whatever the quantity we excavated, you will get the money accordingly. And that is why they accept the rate contract, even if the people know whatever the other practices. But the moment it becomes excavation, some civil work, people go with the what is called as a labor contract or work contract as a rate contract. Whereas when it comes to a bridge, nowadays the bridge is being so well designed prior to execution, people will say that it should be executed with EPC contract, because engineering needs to be made pakka, or that engineering is to be made based on certain reference, and then the contract becomes the thing. So those who are professionals in the project environment has to think about all these things. There is an environmental risk, social risk. Social risk means people may not come in time. People will say that there are so many festivals, they will not turn up. Social risk may be a situation where people will say that we only work in this period. No, construction risk means related to whatever the construction method, how we are going to do it. Political risk means what is the stability of the government, what are the uh, what is called as fairness of the policies, how much policies are fair enough from the all perspective, who are the stakeholder. Why RERA has come into picture? Because there was a lot of political risk related to what is called as construction projects. Now, political risk get reduced if there is a regulator. Regulator is nothing but he teaches you how to do the work, irrespective whatever the design you are. It gives the methodology to work, whereas policy gives the general guidelines to do the work, whereas regulator gives methodology to do the work. And when all these things are listed and may not be taken care in the planning, one can able to get these things in the risk identification and can taken care, so that planning can improve or the risk can get reduced. So these are the different risks which are being identified. Please observe this. Now, what is the learning from this slide? There is something called as internal environment, and that is nothing but a known risk. Whereas political, legal, design specification is unknown risk. Whereas act of God, ecological, safety, health is unknown risk. Are you with me? Do you agree with me?
Yes.
No, whenever we are doing project, if we apply these kind of areas properly, the risk is something which can be help used for fearing somebody also. But if the next person is competent enough, he will not get fear just like that. And that is why I always say that it's a very, very logical, analytical exercise. People say that if you don't have the information, data, don't do the risk management. First generate the data, first do the things, understand the things, and then do the risk management. Shall I move further?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
design, how does it become external design
Yeah.
specification?
Yeah.
So it
No
has to
number
be
of
part
times.
of the
I will
project.
explain. I will explain. The design specification, who defines the design specification for big real estate?
But
Is
design
the,
part of the project, no? Somebody who designs the project leader or project, it gets project leader gets it
does
from the
the
technology.
project, okay, is the project leader is a coordinator for something, he is a responsible for something, or he is doing everything? He is not doing everything. Even in the EPC kind of thing, this design team is doing certain thing. Are you
Okay,
with me?
design is basically outside party.
Within even in the EPC contract, the EPC part, engineering part is something, some part of within the party, but is some different entity. And in that entity, if he says that engineering wise it is not possible, the site people has to modify it. होता है नहीं होता है?
Okay, okay.
So that way you can look at the design and specification. The simple way is that design specification can change. This is a typical framework for construction where PMC is a framework, project management consultancy or project management, which is generally aspect where the design comes from the structural designer, architect. Are you with me?
Yes, yes, sir. Understood.
So, and even within certain contract, engineering can be a threat. People number of times don't do the detail engineering or strong engineering initially, and when it comes to execution, things come, and we say that oh, we use the design badal diya. Now, what is in front of you is the most important part, whatever we have done up till now as our framework, how to apply it. And if you see this, these are the stages. You are saying for horizontal lines that you identify the risk, you analyze the risk, you plan the risk and risk monitoring. So it is a typical management concept. You find the goal, objective, define the goal, you have what is called as design or plan the project, monitor the project, control the project likewise. So it is a concept and you start analyzing different way. And then the question come is that now I am talking risk management as a generic to the applicable to the project. So sometimes when you are absorbing my talk, you have to absorb in little bit, sometimes in part and pieces, and sometimes total as a whole. That exercise as is needs to be done by you for understanding this particular concept. When I am talking risk identification, I will talk just as risk identification. But automatically, which kind of methods to be used for risk identification comes as a project environment. We'll go further, we'll see that. So one time we have to see the project context, other time we have to see the risk thing. And as we know that in project environment, each project is unique, and that each unique project has some component common, some component unique, and then the methods needs to be different. I'm not going into the project management planning or project management. I'm restricting to risk. The first phase is risk identification. When you do the risk identification, can anybody say when we will do the exercise of risk identification, which is seen in the earlier
Project stage, project, beginning of the project.
Yeah, but when you will do, what is a prerequisite to the risk identification?
We need to know what are the results to be achieved.
We have the
Then
context.
against the result target, we will identify the risk. What is the possibility of not achieving the target results?
What you say is right, but the one has to develop the context.
Okay.
Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, project is a big environment, and within that environment, some part we find as a risk. Since the why environmental impact assessment is carried out, because land is the important thing, and that land, when you do the construction, you are changing the environment, that is for sure. But how much? And that becomes a secondary aspect considering the environment as a whole, and that is why they do the impact assessment. The same way, when you are doing the risk assessment, first one has to identify इसमें कुछ दम है क्या, ये risk assessment करने में कोई significance है क्या, importance है क्या, और है तो क्या है, and that is nothing but you are defining the context. I will do the risk assessment in this context, and then my job becomes focused. Then I will start identifying the risk. Otherwise, this exercise is unending. Because I will say something today, I will say something tomorrow. And that is why risk management again come to the same context, that it has to be done as a project or a group and not as an individual activity. He should take care in his work, risk related issues inbuilt in his planning or inbuilt in his work. But as long as project is concerned, he should take that decision or share that thing in a group and take a collective action. And that is why risk management is a collective action, and this is a process. We'll go, if you see this, there is a first stage, a listing of risk. These boxes which are shown below are also equally connected horizontally. And that becomes the different phases of risk management. Let us come to the first phase, how we identify the risk. Where we are, this is the context is that, I will come to this little bit later. Now, as I said, that define the context, and then you are doing material is not received in time, sorry, that is time is a risk, or you don't get the material in time is a risk. Define the objective to identify the risk in material procurement. Define the hypothesis. Purchase order processing is incorrect. There are only single purchase order that once the material is received, that goes to quality management people. Somebody will say that we are having the 3 purchase order. The moment it is prepared, it goes to the quality management people same time. So these are the different mechanisms. That has nothing to do here. And then we said one example saying that like this, and then we say that data related to, you collect the data related to specification, when the purchase order is printed, when the signing has taken place, when the receipt of material is received. One of the point material supply fellow says that I get the money very late, and that is why, or there is a delay in payment, and that is the reason I don't give the so significance, and material is received late. And when we go into the details, the purchase order is of some different date, and receipt of purchase order is something different date, because signing authority all the time moving around. He comes once in a week, and payment terms is in their organization, it's considered from the date of signing, and he feels that he is receiving the money very late. or his balance get. So such kind of data, what is a real data, that one should go with the data, what is happening to that business process, and identify the data, then analyze the data, and then try to interpret what is the cause. Sometimes when we made a hypothesis, hypothesis may be wrong. You can modify the hypothesis, you collect some more data and come to repeat that process. But ultimately, identify the risk. What is in front of you is nothing but a thought process. When you do the risk assessment, one should identify the context, one should define the objective, one should define the hypothesis, one should collect the data, analyze the data, then risk identification will become a scientific process. Otherwise, it will become a blame game without any what is called as evidence. And that is the process needs to be identified. And that is why risk assessment is a little bit difficult, tricky, tedious exercise. Now with this, where to identify this risk? Now, somebody will say that he is a very experienced person and project manager, but if you ask him, will you do the risk identification? He will say that though I have the experience, I am not, we don't want to take complete burden of that, whatever go wrong on him. And then the tool comes as, can you check the work breakdown structure? Can you do the analysis of work breakdown structure, management process, system flow? And by doing this, you will be able to find out the source of risk by way of which you will be in a position to develop the context. Are you with me? So this process goes up and down. And then if you identified the process, you go with the identification process I just now I told you, or some other way. There are certain methods which we will list shortly, and adopting certain method based on this context and based on this assessment, then you require how to quantify, assess, and things like that. And that is why we have to use a certain probability impact scales and do the ranking. And then you can give the significant actions that which risk I will address first. So with this, I'm going further, and I'm trying to say that risk identification, same thing, little bit differently, identify the likely failure. Now, I have purposely written as likely failure because risk is something which is not something which is going to happen exactly the way I'm saying. And that is why uncertainty. Now, those who are with a mathematical background or logical background and things like that, whatever methods we adopt to develop the certain things or work for a certain thing, same way of thinking or same approach we should apply to the uncertainty. What it means, when we do the planning, we try to apply certain mathematical rules of triangular distribution, this, that, and we come to a certain conclusion. When it comes to a failure, what kind of failure, what is the data? There could be something which is qualitative and something which is quantitative. Getting a quantitative information in project is a difficult task, but qualitative information is always available. And that qualitative information can be used for the further development of the project. Further development of risk and management process. You can take as what is a failure. If that likely failure is not exist, there is no need of going for a risk identification. So what you will find that at every stage, the things making knocked out, if it is knocked out, it is going further. So they even define the situation and largest contribution of the factors for the failure. I will take a simple example. We start in the morning and there is a chance that when you start your Activa is not starting. As a theoretical exercise, people will say that it is not working, it is a failure, mechanical failure, the vehicle is not able to start, because there is no petrol, because there is no pressure in the what is called as tires, or there is a good chance that electrical system is not passing the current. And when we do the analysis, we find that number of times there are no mechanical issues, but the electrical issue is more significant for the failure. The mechanical issues, you can overcome that and you are in a position not lead to a risk. It may lead to little bit delay, but if you plan properly, that delay can be get compensated. But if you have something which is which failure we cannot beyond your control and require special attendance, then it can be considered as a major factor contributing to the risk. The corporate decision risk assessment is carried out by top management with a subject and functional expert. Define the process of risk assessment needs to be followed. Definite process of risk assessment needs to be followed. So, like you, if you go into there are standards for risk also. That is what I will say. But if you don't want to go for a standard to that extent, one has to define that what mechanism, methodology we will define for risk identification and risk assessment prior to doing the exercise. And that is what is the functional area of risk management. Now, method of risk identification. How to find out the risk in the project or in a place. And then these are the brainstorming. Brainstorming is a method in which people of the junior level, middle management level come together and brainstorm on the problem to identify the risk. But if it is an open environment, the results will be proper. If it is a closed environment or what is called as bullying environment, the person who is leading the brainstorming, he may report something differently. And that is not the problem of the risk management, that is a problem of the situation and the method. Sometimes people say that we want a written method. They put a questionnaire, give it to the number of people, analyze that information, and try to find out how many people said yes, how many people say no, how many people rated like this, good, bad, excellent kind of thing. And or they may ask for certain objective questions on a certain scale and try to see that what is there, whether that risk exists or not. Another method is a SWOT analysis, which all of you know. There is something called as risk register, which is very characteristics of the project environment, in which everyone who is involved in the project are allowed to write what is likely risk and what is the cause, that is the cause for that failure. He should list it, and if required, he should give the recommendation also. And that risk register is listing from everybody, right from the working person to supervisor to manager, and then that is being reviewed. Whether our work methods is taking care or some of the things can be modified and it will reduce the risk. So risk register is one of the things in front of you. I will bring certain presentation or slide related to risk register. Risk register is the one you define the risk. One of the most important and difficult tasks in risk management is how you define, how you write the risk in proper way. And then you write A, B, C, D, E, F, G like causes of failure. Scooter is not starting. You say that there is no petrol, there is no electrical current, there is no mechanical, there could be a mechanical failure. Could be a tire, maybe flat. So you can say these causes theoretically, and then you will try to think about which one is the most. And that is the way, then that failure will be taken further. Other things may be covered up. And that is why it helps. And that is why people will say that we use the electrical system with a computer control. That is what is coming nowadays in car. So that automobile should not stop. Automobile should not fail because of firing, because of engine. No, these are the kind of things with the technology, they changes, but we are here to understand the concept. And the second is Delphi technique. We'll discuss these two little bit. I have written whatever I have talked to you, and then you say that this description, scooter not starting. Sorry, it should not be starting. It should be scooter not starting, and then this becomes the risk. And causes for failure is the spark not working, battery not working. No, this is the exercise of what is called as risk identification, and what we can say is that way we can list or elaborate and things like that. Why we write something like this? Because unless and until we write, we note, we are not in a position to take the decision. And to take the decision, scooter is not failing whether I should go to mechanic or whether I should go to the thing. For what we do, we fill up the petrol, still it is not working. We have done the, so that is where course of action get decided. And same way, when we are listing this risk, one should has to take a very much efforts while defining. Another example, there is a land acquisition is a risk. And we said that land acquisition is risk. But when we go into the details, there may be inadequate document available. Land ownership is not established. Earlier, I have given the context of why the stakeholder is one of the government agency as a nigam, because land ownership is not established, but he can establish the land ownership with his rules and procedures. And that could be when you say that why land acquisition is taking time, and then people will give such kind of, so these are the information. So these are the kind of risk factor because of which land acquisition become a problem, or land acquisition be a risk. Now, if you see the airport authority land acquisition, people will say that we will give 2 times, 3 times of the market price, because we don't want the risk that the project should go not should get delayed because of land acquisition. They will say that if the documents are not issued, 7-12 वर माझं नाव नाही आहे. First, people will establish that name. If it is not there, and that all procedures also lead to a certain delay. But what the project people has been told, unless and until 70%, 80% land is not acquired, you will not open the project. So the project interest is protected. Are you getting my point? So this relationship needs to be established. This complexity needs to be identified and established so that corrective action can be taken. And once you know that causes, one can take the corrective action very easily. There may be a delay in land acquisition, but it will be, you will see that this delay is limited because we have identified these risks. So that is what I can argue, I can justify. Now, as we go further, there is a technique which is called a Delphi technique. Now, this is more, I think most of you might be knowing also. It is a typical management technique. Anybody is aware? Are you aware of this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you elaborate?
So basically, we will generate a questionnaire and
Yeah.
we will email those or send those questionnaire to
Circulate.
experts,
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
their responses.
Yes. It is only to that extent. It is not that. You take the responses, you circulate that responses.
Yes,
again.
until a consensus is reached
Correct.
on a particular
Issue.
point that has been a particular point
Correct.
or
That is
issue
what
that has
exactly
been
I have
decided.
written on this slide. And that is why I given the below that ABC, A is giving to BC, B is giving to CA, and then this process is iteration is
Repeated
carried.
until all the audience come to a conclusion, and it
All
should be the
experts
same
come
point.
to a
Conclusion on the
conclusion.
same point.
Correct. So by doing this, you get a right judgment. Now, we at the working people may not be knowing it, But at the top management level, these things are happening regularly, because when the corporate is planning certain business, they are definitely taking care of risk. And then there are certain owners' responsibility or owners' judgment is a separate issue. Then that is why a number of times in the society talk like that. These are the risks they are identified, but उनको कुछ करना है, but that is why still they want to do it. Let us see. That kind of remark we make. But we as a project professional, at what stage we will do this? We try, when we don't get a decision from the top management, people adopt this. जो भी कुछ प्रॉब्लम है वो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट ऑपरेशंस, वाइस प्रेसिडेंट प्रोजेक्ट, वाइस प्रेसिडेंट साइट सबको भेज दो, पूछो with prior methodology defined to them that I am doing this exercise. Don't do on your own. Otherwise, you will be fired. Why you are done like that? But if you give a procedure that for certain decisions, I require top management decision and we will follow this decision method under this technique, then everybody will say yes. And then it becomes what is called as smartness of a project professional to use these methods to get the negative answer into positive answer or a decision. That is the way I will see. Shall I go further? Okay. The methods of risk analysis. Once you identified risk, it is not only मैंने वो रिस्क निकाल के रख दिया है, ऐसा है वैसा है, ये रिस्क है वो रिस्क है, अभी 10 रिस्क निकला है, कौन सा पहले करने का? So such kind of questions are always there. There will be always project environment who will be leg pulling is always there. Number of things will be there. But people cannot deny the document or the procedure. And that is why certain, as a theory of risk management, you can understand that there are qualitative risk methods and there are quantitative methods. Qualitative method means you are having the information and you are providing that information and taking the decision. With that information, you are adopting a certain way of thinking. What is a fault or under which conditions the failure will take place. And then you are doing the failure analysis. Decision tree, yes, no kind of thing. Impact matrix. As we discussed Delphi technique, this Delphi technique is not only a method of identification, but it is also a method of analysis and then coming to that. People may say that I will give this decision if it is this, if it is that, this decision kind of thing we get, and then it becomes qualitative. Whereas this, on the other side, we have written something as a quantitative method. In case of quantitative methods, we require what is called as numbers. Planning is an example, cost is an example in which we have generated the number, earned value, cost can become the numbers, or what we can say as actual value can become the number, so that when the project is likely to complete. There are certain methods on costing and budgeting, whereas risk method can also help to कितना cost लगने वाला है अभी तक, उसमें भी कितना cost ले सकते हैं. So these are the places where require numbers and you use those numbers. This method of multiple evaluation review technique is based on root mean square method. We use such a certain method when treating the problems of planning also. It is not the case that we don't do. When for doing the planning, we have a 3-point method, which is nothing but a quantitative way doing the planning. So try to understand these things, and then we'll go further that there are two methods. Whereas in project environment, information of actual data is, I will say, chances are only 10-20%. Whereas qualitative data, a lot of information is available. And that is why people go with this qualitative method and try to convert into quantitative way. I will explain it. Now, in order to quantify the risk, we have to learn few more terminologies. And these terminologies for quantification are risk exposure, risk priority number, risk fractionization. These 10 component makes a total risk. So this is the one identification of or nomenclature by way of which whatever we try to characterize that risk, we are trying to convert it into what is measurable kind of thing. Why? Why we want to measure? Because we want to give the importance which should be addressed first. Now you will say that this is a hypothetical exercise. What is the significance of it? And that is why people try to adopt certain statistical method, like take a more bigger sample, take the information from number of people, and then a bigger the sample, better is the accuracy. Are you with me? Are you able to get this statement, last statement? So you adopt this procedure with number of people, collect that information and do that. But what information, what way it is to be done, that we are trying to do that. We define the probability, we try to understand the impact. Now, understanding or defining impact is fully a qualitative exercise, and it's a understanding. A person falls from a tall building, he may lose a part of the body or he may die. Now, for that, one need not have a certain expertise. One has to identify a situation and logically try to interpret. If required, may take the help of some expert. But we can always envisage what could be the impact. Are you with me? Whereas for the probability, here we are not using the probability which we use in our mathematics, which is a numerical probability. Here we use the probability which is a subjective probability. And that subjective probability is defined in the further 1 minute. This is the way it is defined. We can get certain information like this. So here it is given large scale. Person will say that was itna accurate information nahi mil sakta hai. But you can define some way or the other, probability is less than 30%, 30 to 70%, 70% or more, or somebody will say that 80% and more, 30 to 80%, less than 30 to 80%. And that is the way people try to convert that probability range. And for that, qualitatively, they will say that we develop the scale, and that scale is nothing but probability scale and impact scale. Now, one more scale I have written there is a detectability. The meaning is that whatever the failure factors we listed, which one is the most relevant to it? Like in case of a scooter not starting, most relevant factor is nothing but electrical fault or spark is not getting current. And then 65% of the risk is 80% of the risk is related to that, and that is the way we rate it, those factors. And we come to a real solution. Whereas when we calculate our risk exposure, we are trying to find out generic information. But the moment you convert into what is called as detectability factor, again measured like this, you will come to a certain conclusion that this factor is more, and then relationship can be established. That relationship will be based on situation. And to do all these things, there is a better way to have a format, methodology, sample, and a group of people who are involved in that should respond to this kind of system so that we get the quantification. So this is what is the subjective probability. It is based on certain statements. And then you come to exposure calculations. And that exposure calculations can be quantified differently. In one of the exercise, people have developed this matrix that in the project, if my loss is less than lakh of rupees, high value is 5 lakh of rupees, medium is 10 lakh of rupees. So you can say that there is a matrix in which you are define the scale that any probability less than 20% is low probability, medium probability, high probability. And as I said earlier, we can give the numbers as 1, 2, 3 on a 3-point scale. Somebody will say that I have more information, I can use 5-point scale. If you have precise information, he can go with a more, but he should be able to distinguish. He means the people should be able to distinguish, information should be able to distinguish. Now, whenever such exercises are carried out, are they real losses? Are they real? They are not real, but they are virtual kind of information generated or hypothetical information generated about the situation. That hypothetical information, you can put it into a certain order and you can find out which one is the best, which one is the solution. Because without numbers, we cannot able to work on. And that is why we will go further and I will show you at a later date what is the way it takes into. Are you with me? Are you able to get this? This is the most common method applied as a severity of risk, and that is what is being, people try to zero down that so many risks are there, how many are in this first range, how many are in second range and third range, and then they can plan what is called as risk management plan. Okay. Now these are the different risks. This helps to develop the hypothesis for the risk, quality risk view. You can take any of the risks. These are generally happen in project. Now, whatever I said earlier, that risk you can, now this is, when I say it is low, it means low impact, low probability. But if I say that risk exposure is 1, I quantify it. And then I say that out of the risks which are listed below, just for the discussion, A and E are the risks which are low, in our opinion, a group of people. And then whatever the way we got a data based on this scale from 10, 15 people, and then you summarize that data. And after summarizing the data, you find that most of the people has rated it low probability, low impact. And that has comes under AE. So out of different risk, what could be irrespective of whether you know all the details, as a management decision, people will say that you first address the D or you address a certain F. No, not F. There is a certain risk or which is having a highest number. So here I am saying D. There may be a something which is below it, and that may be a something that whichever is highest, you can take a decision. Now, one of the important thing in risk management is that people will say that you carry out this exercise, but take the decisions based on situation. What is the meaning? Is that this exercise has a certain time requirement. Situation may change. So if there is a possibility that though the number is 4, in case of certain D risk, and high risk is having some other number, and that should be taken care based on the analysis, but situation is changed, and that is why you should go with D first and then another. And that is why number of times people will go with only qualitative methods and they try to take a decision. They try to list it, write it, the causes for it, remedy for it, and those remedies they are taking, and then accordingly they do the decision. But those with a, what I can say is multi-projects, this is not the, this they cannot do with only qualitative kind of thing. There is a need to have quantification. One method is impact matrix, And another method, when it comes to, there is a delay in planning. There is a say is that critical path method is most risky. Critical path method in our definition makes highest time. Based on that, we calculate. But if you go with the calculating the distribution for the activity, you will find that you have A, B, C, one after other as a, what is called as activity, and you will find that there is a number which you have allocated, and let's say 5 weeks, but that number is not a mathematical number. It is a number with some distribution. And that thing leads to, even if you have all resources, projects get delayed. And the answer lies in such mathematical power that this is not a number, this is a statistical number, it has a distribution. 5 plus 5 is 10, but I require 12 weeks because of the certain distribution characteristics. And that can be found out by plotting the probability of the what is called as S-curve. And you will find that when you plot the S-curve along with the probability, you will get the reasons. You will get the mathematics behind or other statistics behind it. And then you will start, why we have to do it? What is the need? The need is that when the project will complete, that everybody wants to know. And if I estimate from that, my decision may be wrong. But if I'm having the numbers of cumulative, what is called as cumulative completion of project, and whatever I planned, and then whatever the probability I estimated from the frequency distribution, that frequency distribution would be divided by the total frequency is nothing but probability. Frequency upon total frequency is nothing but the probability. And with that probability, because you have the number, you can able to estimate the delay. The delay which is being estimated by critical path and the time estimated by Monte Carlo, that difference is called as the risk in delay, the risk in planning. That is the way. There is a certain material which I shared. It is a case. I request the people to share with you. And this is what way the impact matrix is being used. You will find that, and you have a certain matrix as a risk score or a risk exposure. And in that risk exposure, you are seeing green line, yellow line, red boxes. What is the meaning? Is that I will address those risks which are having these numbers and above. So it becomes a professional management decision. I'm coming to end. So this is what is the thing, hardly 1 or 2 slides left. So this is a severity matrix which is being developed with different scale, and that becomes a guiding. Now, once you have done that, there is a how to handle that skill. And then there is a jargon, like you hold the risk. As we said in the beginning, we cannot have a plan without zero risk. You cannot have an activity with zero risk. You cannot have an event like that. So people say that you hold the risk. Those who are very low in way, you hold the risk. A person is carrying certain material, has a risk. But you say that you move with some machine, but the still risk remains. To transfer the risk to the one who can handle properly. And that is why a number of times we transfer the risk to the insurance company. We pay the premium, and that becomes the share and transfer. Premium is some sort of amount which is towards whatever the loss it will take place, you are just giving some amount. Share the risk who are competent to handle. Now, this kind of risk management tool can be applied between the stakeholder also. Whether this risk will be handled by client, whether that risk will be handled by financial institute, whether that risk can be handled by developer, whether that risk will be handled by contractor or subcontractor. And that is some kind of strategy can be planned. And then after the project planning, if these risks have been allocated, the project becomes success. The last question comes is that what is the advantage? These are the advantages. Enhance the decision making, protect the assets, resources. So these are all advantages by doing the risk management. And then the question comes, why people don't do it? And these are the reasons. Thank you. I also give some training on project related, particularly risk and cost. Anybody feels that they require certain insight, they can always contact me on these numbers and mail. No, forum is open for discussion.
Yeah, any questions?
Sir, can you go to previous slide? I think we missed it.
Which one?
Yeah, just previous, just after this. Yeah.
This is advantage. You want
Okay.
advantage or you want lacuna? You tell me.
Okay, thank you.
I can share this PPT. I request.
Maybe on WhatsApp?
We
You
will
can
send
say-
the PPT to everyone, not a problem.
On WhatsApp, is it?
No, you will get an email, no? Then that
Yeah,
you
okay.
Take it on email.
You will get the
No.
PPT.
I will suggest that you make Acrobat file and share it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank
Is
you
it
very much.
okay?
Sir. Thank you very much. Yes.
Any other thing?
That's all. Thank you.
Hope I am able to cover the topic and the time, everything I could able to manage, irrespective of the starting trouble.
No problem.
No problem. It was a wonderful presentation, amazing, and
Yes.
a lot of good insights. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
Vivek,
Anyone?
will you conclude?
Yes. Or so. Okay, great. So I think this was wonderful presentation, and I'm looking at the chat continuously and seeing the message of the people who are appreciating like anything. So this is a wonderful one.
Thank you.
Yes. So, Dr. Deshpande, can you stop the sharing current?
Yeah, sure.
PPT? Yes. So thank you very much to all the people who have spared some time and joined this session. And I'm sure with such a wonderful presentation, everybody should have got benefited. And as said, we will send the email. Then we will also share the presentation with all the people.
You can
Maybe
share another 2 documents also.
Yes, we will share the other supporting documents also with this.
That
So-
will help anybody to how to formulate the methodology in their environment.
Absolutely. And very thank to Dr. Pramod Deshpande for taking up this session, putting so much of effort, bringing so much of things together and giving this such an effective presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for all participants for
Yes.
patient listening. And
Yes. Ketan, you have something like
Yeah.
Dr. Jai, anything?
I think in a short time he has covered need of risk identification to risk management methodologies. So
Yes.
this is a comprehensive, you can say, topics from need identification to the treatment or mitigation to be done. And I think the response has been good. So we will continue our online session for quite some time.
Yes.
And we'll come up with the next program in the
Yes.
month of July. So see you
Yes.
all in the month of July.
Yes. So I think there are more acceptance to this. A lot of people do have appreciated this. I think we have further rains in August and September. So let's continue with this method. Okay.
If I use
Yeah.
this platform to share my expertise, is it okay?
Absolutely.
Those who feel that on the small things if they want to interact that what way I should go about risk management or cost management kind of thing, they are open for discussion. Everything is not charged as a consultancy. The thing is that I also learn in the process, and I will get a
Sir,
satisfaction to help.
we will have more sessions with you, definitely. And I think I'm pretty sure this will be very helpful to everyone.
No,
including
even
you.
if there are people who are interested to have 1.5 day sessions where we can have practical sessions. So generally this risk management from right end, start to end, can be covered in 1.5 day to 2 day in a very nice way, so that people can understand. So
Sure,
that
we
is
will plan
welcome.
this out.
That is
Definitely.
welcome.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I
And
leave?
thanks to everyone. Yes.
Thank you.
And so coming over here, we will come back very soon with another session in July, as Ketan just suggested. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
Nice session, sir. Excellent session. And it was vast area which you have addressed, and really it is appreciated. Means all it is the content wise for MTech courses. This is complete to one course as such, and you have covered it in 2 hours. So very excited to learn all those things, and definitely all the participants, they might have benefited, so they can implement and try to work it in their professional work. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great,
I
great.
suggest that if any student
Thank
is
you very much.
interested to do something project on planning, he is welcome, particularly
Yes.
because MTech students are good in their mathematical aptitude, and they can use the certain method and learn the power of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great,
So you can
great. So
also-
thank you very much to
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of, and this is let's close this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.